Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 2 of CME 610 Data Science and Education. This week, we're focusing on secondary data, metadata, and educational systems. Last week, we established the idea that educational data science is deeply connected to ethics, representation, equity, and interpretation. And this week, we're going to begin applying those ideas to actual educational data sets and systems. One of the major goals of this week is to help us think critically about the kinds of educational data collected at local, state, and national levels, and to examine what those data sets can and cannot tell us about learners, schools, and communities. Secondary data refers to the data collected by someone else for a purpose other than your immediate research question. Examples could include census data, NAEP data, school demographic reports, graduation rates, discipline data, and district assessment reports. Secondary data can help researchers identify large-scale patterns in systems, but researchers must also critically examine how the data were collected, categorized, and reported. We need to ask questions about who designed the categories, who was intended or excluded, and what information might be missing. Metadata is often described as data about data. Metadata helps us to understand where data came from, how they were collected, how variables were defined, and what limitations may exist within the data set. Metadata is important because it helps researchers to interpret findings responsibly. Without metadata, researchers may misunderstand what a data set actually represents or overlook important contextual information. Educational systems are not neutral structures. They're shaped by our policy, geography, history, politics, and the funding that we receive and the structures around it. When we analyze educational data sets, we're not simply examining numbers. We're examining systems of opportunity and access. So when we look at school zoning, district boundaries, the access that certain individuals have to taking advanced courses, how teachers are distributed across schools and districts, and how resources are allocated. All of those things are influencing educational experiences and outcomes. Where students live is also something that shapes the educational opportunities available to them. School zoning and district boundaries influence the funding, access to certain courses, technology access, and extracurricular opportunities, as well as perceptions that people in the broader community, as well as those within the community, have about their school and the perceptions they have about where they live. So, all of these systems are deeply connected to equity. Educational data sets can help us to reveal those patterns that are related to race, income, housing, transportation, and historical segregation. One of this week's readings is Stephan and colleagues' article, People Use Math as a Weapon. This article is designed to help us think critically about mathematics and data in public and in civic contexts. During the COVID-19 pandemic, as people encountered graphs, dashboards, mortality statistics, predictive models, and visualizations, we were constantly bombarded with a lot of data. But quantitative information can be interpreted in very different ways. Some representations inform the public responsibly. Others amplify confusion and misinformation. So, this reading reminds us that mathematics and statistics carry social and political power. The data set for this week's exploration activities are designed to help you practice critical interpretation. As you examine the educational data sets, slow down and ask yourself some questions. What patterns do you notice? What assumptions are built into the data set? What information might be missing? And what additional data might you need? All data sets are really just partial representations of educational experiences. Strong educational researchers learn to interpret data sets thoughtfully, critically, and ethically. Students encounter quantitative information constantly through social media, elections, different dashboards, rankings, and news reports. And if they're not taught how to critically interpret data representations, then that quantitative information becomes another tool of manipulation rather than a tool of understanding. Mathematics classrooms can become spaces where students learn to analyze evidence, question representations, and think critically about what's fair and what's equitable, and the power structures that exist within classrooms, among peers, and beyond the school. This week, you will complete the Quant Hub module on metadata and secondary data, the congressional district activity, the data set analysis discussion, and data reflection memo number 2. As you complete these assignments, focus less on finding perfect answers and more on developing thoughtful interpretation and meaningful questions. Critical education data science isn't simply about technical accuracy, it's about ethics, representation, interpretation, and human impact. So, as we close this week, continue reflecting on several questions. How do educational systems shape what data becomes visible? What stories do educational data sets tell? And what stories might they fail to tell? How do geography, politics, and demographics influence educational opportunity? And what responsibility do researchers have when interpreting and communicating educational data? These questions will continue guiding our work throughout the semester.